Hello and welcome to part 13. We're getting pretty close. Today what we're going to do is put the turbo pedestal on. We got the M55 swirl motor, we got the alternator, we've got the flex plate, and we got to torque that crank pulley bolt down as well. For putting flex plate bolts in and the crank pulley bolt, Mercedes sells a special tool to hold the flex plate basically in place and to lock that down so you can torque those bolts. And, you know, if you want to send your hard-earned money to Stuttgart, you're certainly welcome to do so. I'll show you kind of a cheap, well, free actually way to lock that in place. It'll be safe. It'll hold it in place. It'll allow you to torque it, and it won't cost you a dime, more than likely. So watch for that. The other thing to mention, the wiring harness. I'm aware that, yes, the wiring harness has to go underneath the fuel rails and all of that. I put those on for two reasons. Number one, what I'd like you to think is that I put those on to keep contaminations from getting into the fuel system, because that sounds like a really good idea, and I suppose it is. The real reason, though, is that I know I will just lose those parts if I don't attach them to something that's really hard to lose, like an engine. Not saying I couldn't lose the engine, but it's a lot harder. Yeah, those are just all finger tight, so don't panic on that. So speaking of that wiring harness, the other thing we have going on here is that when I put it into the car, that's when I'm going to be able to put the turbo and the collectors and all of that, you know, attach all those parts to the back end of it. In theory, there's a way, and it's supposedly, according to WIS and according to people that have, I've been talking to in the grassroots forums, there's a way to disconnect the engine harness from the chassis harness and you take it out with the engine, put it in with the engine, all of that, and I would love to do that. I cannot for the life of me figure out where that connector is supposed to be. I've looked, and I can't find it. That perhaps it's super simple, and I'm just, completely unable to find it. I'll certainly, believe that. But end of the story is I can't find it. The reason that's significant is that there is a wiring harness section that goes directly underneath the turbo inlet, and it cannot be moved out of that spot without first removing the turbocharger itself. That means that if you want to, replace the M55 swirl motor, you have to pull the turbo off, which means replacing gaskets and bolts and doing a whole lot of really difficult work that's hard to get to, just to get a frickin' wiring harness out of the way. Not really the choice I would have made when the engine was designed if I were designing it, but then again, I kind of have a feeling this engine really didn't get designed as much as it just sort of like happened. And, here we are, lucky us. Anyway, I believe that kind of covers everything. Let's go ahead and get started.
So this is the one that I believe, this is the wrong one. This is the one that I believe is the correct motor, right? So that's the 05 designation instead of the, I think the 04 designation. This is the 04 designation motor. You can see they look basically the same. Here's where they get a little different though. These arms down here. So I don't know what's up with that or whatever, but that seems to be, at least from the outside, that's the only difference I see. Very, very, very minor kind of thing. Weird. All right, so we're going to get the swirl motor installed. It's a lot easier to get to it if we can stand behind the engine here, or we can really get into the V. One thing is the clips, they say you're not supposed to reuse, so I got a new set of clips. I don't really know why. The old ones seem to be kind of still pretty solid and together. And I know I think I reused one pair of them last time I did this, but that's all right. We'll use new ones. They're cheap, relatively speaking. And all right, so we've got the swirl motor, or the swirl flap linkage. Now this is going to wind up bolting in, so it's going to bolt here and up here while this linkage goes in. So we're going to put the linkage in first. And again, a lot easier to do like this. All right, squeeze that in and click. Clicks right in place. And then we have this one here. We'll do the same thing. like that. And then we'll just clip that in like that. There. Oh, so much easier to do the swirl motor that way. Alright, and now we can see that's going to fit right in there. And we can see the swirl motor will now work like that. Hold it up here. You can see how it's moving both of those flaps. So that's the swirl motor. So much easier to install when it's not on the car. Okay. So we have our 2 bolts to go in here. And no torque spec is given. They just say fully tighten. Alright, and there it is. So this piece here is called the oil supply connection fitting. I call it the turbo pedestal, but whatever. This is how the oil gets into the turbo. Comes up through here and through there, right? Alright, so oil in and out. Make sure that's been cleaned out, which it has. Our mounting surfaces look good, which they are. Alright, so we have a new gasket. They say reuse that. We have our 4 bolts. It's our E12 bolts. Got that. And they're going to go to 20 Newton meters, which is 177 inch-pounds. So, alright, so that gasket goes on there like so. And this guy feeds in here like so. Alright, hang on. Okay, so this has a locating dowel in it, which has gotten a little lost in there. So it doesn't want to locate quite right. Alright, so I pulled the locating dowel out, put it back in. So now it'll locate in the front and the rear. Just want to be sure that we do not wind up into a situation where we're leaking oil. There. All right. So now we have 4 bolts. All right. Now we'll torque it. 177 inch-pounds to torque. All right, now that's in. So these bolts are for the turbo itself. The problem is we can't put the turbo in yet because there's a wiring harness that goes underneath the turbo. I don't know why. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. No, that's not true. That's not true. But it is a dumb thing. And yeah, so here we are. All right, moving on. Alright, so this is the new alternator. It's used, obviously, but it's a replacement. During the part out phase, I decided to sell mine. So I was able to pull one off of a 2011 E350 Blue Tech that just happened to wander into a local junkyard. It's sort of local. It's very heavy. Basically, there's just 4 bolts to hold the alternator on. No big deal. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go, alternator. All right, so next step. We've got the engine. We need to put the flywheel on. we need to find a way to lock the flywheel in place. And that needs to be tightened up. And once that's done, see the car is now back here in its rightful place in the center of the shop. And it's sitting on the lift. See down there. This way I'll be able to kind of get up underneath it there. Be a little bit easier. But at this point, put the flywheel on and it goes in there. Let's see. Before the flywheel, however, we need to put the rear crank seal on here. So we're going to first make sure this is all clean with some acetone. Get all the old oil and old sealant off. Clean all the way around there real well. You might think you want to apply the Loctite 5970 directly to the block and then put the seal on. Don't do that. That's the wrong way to do it. If you do it that way, you'll go to put the plate on and realize that there's an oil channel that you didn't cover. So you have to wipe all that off the block, and then you have to go ahead and put it onto the plate itself. So apply the sealant to the plate. Again, follow the pattern that's in WIS, and then you'll put the plate onto the engine with the sealant on the plate. Putting this plate on, they call for a special tool to do this. I did not use the special tool. I went ahead and got some good oil on the seal to lubricate it, and then slid it over and sort of massaged it into place. The real key here is that there's like a little lip on the seal, just like any other crank seal or cam seal or any rotating assembly seal that you're going to have like this. And I'm using my thumbs to make sure that that seal is not folding over itself as it goes on. A little bit of a tricky process, but with a little bit of tenacity, you'll be able to get it on without tearing anything, creating any leaks. Once the seal's all the way on, you'll be able to very easily slide the whole plate back into place, and there you have it. Now just put the bolts in and get them torqued down. There is no specific pattern, although I usually like to use a kind of a crisscross pattern when I'm torquing things down like this. There is a two-stage process. The first is 8 Newton meters or 71 inch-pounds. And they say before moving to the second stage, you should go in and wipe off any excess sealant that might squirt out. The second stage then reset your torque wrench to 10 Newton meters or about 88.5 inch-pounds, like so. And then you can go ahead and torque it down for the second stage, and then you're finished. And now the flex plate can be put onto the end of the crankshaft. The retaining ring can be put on, and we can thread the bolts in. We can't really fully tighten it yet because, of course, it'll just turn the whole engine. So we've got to hold the crankshaft in place, and I'll show you the special tool that I found for that here in a moment. But first, get these bolts in. We'll get them in as kind of finger tight, basically, without turning the engine. Our friends at Mercedes sell a special tool for holding the flywheel in place, or since you have an extra exhaust or intake valve hanging around anyway, one will fit very nicely in the teeth of the ring gear there, and a little notch in the housing around that flex plate. That will keep that thing from moving. If you put one on each side, you'll be able to do the crank bolt in the front and the flywheel bolts in the back. Once you have the flex plate blocked, now we can go ahead and torque the flywheel bolts on there to 45 Newton meters. And then we do a 90-degree angle on each of them as well. So 45 Newton meters and 90 degrees. Takes a little bit of doing. Get your long breaker bar for that, and then those will be on. And the crank pulley bolt goes to 200 Newton meters. Yikes! And then 2 turns each of 90 degrees. That is a serious bolt. That'll wrap up part 13. Next time around, we're going to go ahead and get the engine dropped into the vehicle, and hopefully we'll get it started up as well.
hopefully you'll be back for part 14. See you next time. Thanks for watching.